Western Hills, Second Installation. Appendix C, Masonic Connections between Texas and Louisiana. During the early 19th century, land barons, known as impresarios, were granted territories by the Mexican and Texan governments. Anglo establishments were essentially governed by the impresarios who had authorized them to join their settlements. Stephen F. Austin, a prominent Freemason, was one of the most successful of these impresarios, starting with 300 families in the southeast region of Texas, but eventually mounting to over 28,000 colonists by the time of the Texas Revolution in 1835. Shortly after the Texas Revolution, numerous other settlements began being awarded under the Texas land grant system, including the Shady Grove region, which now makes up part of Irving, Texas. While the impresario system had dissolved, the Masonic influence over the distribution of land and the building of cities continued to thrive. Jacob Castor's plot is recorded on this 1886 map of Dallas County. Other members of the Castor family would obtain more plots over the decades that followed. The Grand Lodge of the Republic of Texas, ancient free and accepted Masons, was formed from 3 lodges chartered by Louisiana in 1835. It became independent in 1837, adopting its own constitution in 1838. Many Republic of Texas leaders, including presidents, were Masons, and lodges served as community centers, often housing early schools. The ties between education, public libraries, schoolbook publication, and the Freemasons will prove significant in this exploration. In essence, the Texas colonies were governed from Louisiana during their formation, and those old Masonic ties were passed down to arrive in the second and third generation heirs in the 1950s and 60s. We will see that it is significant how the 2 staging areas where Lee Harvey Oswald was being framed coincide with U.S. territory that was not just influenced by, but also founded on Freemasonry. Lee Harvey Oswald spent several months in New Orleans in 1963, where he publicly promoted pro-Castro views, however, oddly, privately associated with anti-Castro activists. He also contacted people later linked to intelligence and/or organized crime. Oswald was arrested for an altercation on the street during his public protest, and it was widely publicized under circumstances that many have found suspicious. He then moved with Ruth Paine's assistance from New Orleans to Irving, just shortly before the assassination. Many skeptics believe Oswald's public appearances, even being invited for an interview at the local TV news station after he was released from jail, were due to orders given to him that would later be used to paint him as an assassin motivated by communist hatred for the United States. Attorney Jim Garrison's case cast light on CIA and Mafia ties to Oswald in New Orleans. There was Clay Shaw, an international businessman with ties to an organization known as Permindex. He was also linked to intelligence groups in New Orleans and supposedly knew Oswald. There was Guy Bannister, who ran a private detective office at the same address on Oswald's pro-Castro leaflets. He was fiercely anti-communist, ironically, and he had ties to the FBI, CIA, and Cuban exile groups. David Ferry was a Civil Air Patrol instructor who knew Oswald. He worked with anti-Castro Cubans. He associated with Guy Bannister. He died suspiciously, and he allegedly helped Oswald with alibis or travel. Carlos Marcello was a Louisiana and South Texas crime boss. He was deported to Guatemala by Robert Kennedy in 1961. He allegedly vowed revenge. While all of the usual suspects in New Orleans, such as the Mafia, the CIA, and other international forces, certainly played their roles, the media's silence toward other potential connections ironically echoes with thunderous volume. Given that Louisiana founded the earliest Texas Masonic lodges, perhaps the best-kept secret among the true conspirators, who as Freemasons are supposed to be some of the best secret keepers in town, were their ties to military intelligence and the press, which were being run by Masonic and internationalist puppeteers with money and political power. As covered in the main presentation, the Castor Cabin's relocation just 1 block from the Irving Masonic Lodge is a testament to Freemasonry's influence among certain members of the Castor family and the city of Irving. We also observed that the Marvin Randall Clock Tower is situated in a very deliberate manner, forming a perfect carpenter's square in proportion to the Castor Cabin and the Masonic Lodge. What about other Irving landmarks? The original Irving Public Library also now has a curiously Masonic-like World War II monument in the form of an obelisk stationed in front of it. Let's recall that George Washington was a known Freemason, and it appears the monument in Irving is intended to emulate the same pillar pointing upward to the heavens. Upon closer examination, we see that the Irving Public Library was formed on May 5, 1941. Civic activist Esther Hurwitz opened Irving's first library in a 7-foot by 12-foot corner of Louis Blaylock's furniture store at 126 East 1st Street. Louis Blaylock. Remember Louis Owens Blaylock? He was W. H. Roberts' business partner until 1967, and he appears to have employed John Clifford Randall in the early 1960s, providing a very early link between Blaylock, Roberts, and the Randall dynasty. W. H. Roberts, next-door neighbor to Ruth and Michael Payne, alleged property shepherd of Western Hills, and the Mayflower edition. Louis Owens Blaylock was also the grandson of former Dallas mayor Louis Blaylock from 1923 to 1927. Interesting Louis Blaylock coincidences. He was a known Scottish Rite and York Rite Freemason, another Masonic influence in the Western Hills Property Shepherd Network. Also founder of Blaylock Publishing Company. That implies blatant ties to the Texas Schoolbook Depository Network. He was appointed police, fire, and finance commissioner. Like many other co-conspirators, he was awarded civic privileges. He was friend and protege to Sam Houston, deep ties to Masonic founders of Texas. His grandson, Louis Owens Blaylock, employed John Clifford Randall, and is the business partner of alleged co-conspirator W. H. Roberts, who lived next door to Ruth Payne. The IIC also observes that many members in the Irving staging areas were affiliated specifically with the Air Force and other lines of work related to aeronautical, engineering, and construction skills. Given the clearly Masonic International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Union logo, I believe the Masonic and covert military connections to the JFK assassination are becoming quite evident. David Ferry in New Orleans also fits this profile. From the main presentation, when Benny Castor moved to 430 Collins at the end of 1965, he lived 2 minutes from his boss and friend, Bill Randall, who lived 1/2 mile from the gas station where Benny Castor probably gave a rifle to Robert Adrian Taylor in exchange for car repairs, which was later reported as having been Lee Harvey Oswald. The Roberts subdivision was centered around Roberts Avenue. Within just blocks, we have close association between the Castors, the Randalls, the Roberts, and even the person Collins Drive is named after. In addition to the Marvin Randall Clock Tower, the Castor Cabin, and the Irving Masonic Lodge forming a perfect carpenter's square, the First Baptist Church of Irving is also situated in a very similar manner. Through the church, we can connect C.B. Hardy, the Wilhoits, E.W. Campbell, C.P. Schneider, and the Frasers. Even the gas station where Benny Joe Castor allegedly sold a rifle in exchange for car repairs is at a right angle to the Marvin Randall Clock Tower. A former Castor family church congregation also relocated to a very interesting location, also in proportion to a carpenter's square. If we head due south, eventually we will wind up at the shooting range at the Sportsdrome where Benny Joe Castor or Lloyd Ray Castor allegedly staged a Lee Harvey Oswald altercation. And curiously, the Randall family business, Irving Countertop, can also be geographically related in similar fashion. Perhaps some of the patterns on the map are merely by chance. However, I argue that the one here, which includes First Baptist Church of Irving, is indeed significant. We will soon demonstrate that the Southern Baptist Convention had their own motives against John F. Kennedy, a Catholic. And there are also more compelling connections to be made. Let's get to know another one of Texas' more notable Freemasons, and most likely one of the financiers of the John F. Kennedy assassination. Carr P. Collins' autobiography is titled Man on the Move. A traveling man is a traditional Masonic expression, especially in Blue Lodge, craft, Masonry, and older English language rituals. It refers to a Freemason who is journeying and may seek hospitality from another lodge, assistance from fellow Masons, and recognition as a brother Mason while away from home. Carr P. Collins owned the Mayflower Investment Corporation, and it is Collins Drive that is named after him, where Benny Joe Castor wound up, within just a couple of years after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. In 1960, Carr P. Collins was an outspoken critic of Kennedy and a staunch supporter of Richard Nixon. He led the Texans for Nixon Group, a radical, religiously polarizing, Klan-affiliated organization that even other Republican groups would not claim. Carr P. Collins stated that he gave his full support to the Nixon Lodge ticket and accused John F. Kennedy of dividing the nation over religion, comparing it to a race for survival. Carr P. Collins was a staunch Southern Baptist. Built in 1957, Baylor University's Collins Hall is named after him. Please take special note that Baylor is also located in Waco, the Texas capital of Freemasonry. Collins' donation of Dallas property to Baylor University in 1961 was the largest gift ever made to the university at that time, and in 1979, Collins contributed $1 million to establish the Carr P. Collins Chair of Finance at Baylor. How Southern Baptist was Baylor University? Baylor operated under strict conservative governance by the Southern Baptist Convention until it revised its charter in 1994, breaking a 100-year tradition by allowing its first on-campus dance. There is an old joke that still floats around the Baylor campus. Why were the Southern Baptists so opposed to drinking alcohol? The answer: because it might lead to dancing. In 1928, Collins once referred to political races as crusades for righteousness, and even threatened heaps of curses and suffering businesses for those who opposed him. To quote Mr. Collins, "Curses will be heaped upon you." By 1960, Collins had graduated to making much bigger threats, making the statement that Kennedy has deliberately set out to make a martyr of himself on the Catholic issue, and that he would oppose Kennedy's election even if the senator were Protestant. Yes, Carr P. Collins in 1960 had publicly stated that Kennedy had made a martyr of himself. Perhaps Collins' entire adult life has been one of bullying and defrauding others. According to one article, Collins' most famous business endeavor was the 1930s coast-to-coast radio selling of crazy crystals, dehydrated minerals from the springs at Mineral Wells, Texas. When reconstituted with water, they supposedly acted as a laxative. Sales reputedly reached $3 million a year before the Pure Food and Drug Administration declared the product fraudulent. From our main presentation, we also pointed out that Carr P. Collins Sr. is named in a 1956 petition challenging the IRS's ruling of tax evasion against Mayflower Investment Company. The appeal was overturned, and Collins and his associates were found to be willfully negligent. The IIC proposes that it is no mere coincidence that the institutions of the Southern Baptist Convention and Freemasonry would be so intertwined between Waco, Irving, and New Orleans. We can connect the home builders of both the Mayflower Edition and Western Hills, Roberts and Blaylock, to not only the residents on 5th Street, the Randalls and the Paynes, as well as the First Baptist Church of Irving, C.B. Hardy, the Wilhoits, C.P. Schneider, E.W. Campbell, but also to one of Southern Baptist Freemasonry's kingpins, Car P. Collins. In 1913, Car P. Collins was appointed first secretary of the Industrial Accident Board, see the Texas Workers' Compensation Commission, which had been founded as a result of legislation sponsored by his father in the Texas Senate. This started Collins' career in insurance, founding the Fidelity Union Life Insurance Company in 1928. Collins went on to become a domineering magnate in the insurance industry. From our main presentation, remember who bought the house located across the street from Ruth Payne from Marvin Randall so that Alfred Randall could buy the one down the street and then scurry Lennie Mae Frazier Randall and Bill Randall there all during the same month? It appears Marvin Randall sold his house to National Life and Accident Insurance Company. This would allow for a quick sale once Alfred Randall was approved for financing to purchase 2439 West 5th Street. National Life and Accident Insurance Company does not appear to be one of Collins' companies. However, the IIC speculates that Collins was influential enough as well as corrupt enough to have collaborators hiding behind the facade of being an industry competitor with whom he could collude and share common interests. Like colluding home builders, insurance companies would rather agree on a higher price that they all uphold in lieu of competing against each other in an open consumer-driven market, which will send their prices, as well as their profits, downward. Therefore, the IIC proposes that the buyer of Marvin Randall's rent house to Bill and Lennie Randall remains appropriately suspicious. It was directly across the street from Ruth Payne, for 2 years, the same tenants as the home where Buell Wesley Frazier later landed. Buell Wesley Frazier's landing spot was also furnished by another Randall family member, Alfred E. Randall. Marvin's home was bought by an institution that would have immediate financing. Marvin's homebuyer may have been an allied competitor in the life insurance industry with just as much to lose as Car P. Collins if the Kennedys began arresting white-collar crime lords. In addition to being a financier of shady real estate deals, insurance oligarchies, and fraudulent laxatives, like any politically ambitious dictator, Collins appears to have had control of the local and national media as well. Collins is an extremely significant example of Kennedy's affluent enemies, who were pulling the levers of their political machines against him from the Masonic homeland of America, i.e., Texas, Louisiana. Collins admitted to calling the Democratic nominee, John F. Kennedy, a Khrushchev lover. He was reported by the Dallas Morning News to have used 24 Texas stations that were carrying the political broadcast that described John F. Kennedy as a Khrushchev lover who is soft toward communism. He also said that his Catholic friends had given him the nomination. On April 27, 1961, in his speech titled The President and the Press, President Kennedy described a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. He also stated that there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Especially recalling that President Kennedy drew a line in the sand, specifically by withholding air support in the Bay of Pigs. It seems President Kennedy knew his enemies behind the scenes well. Yet it seems other supposed champions of truth want to keep them behind the scenes. Sometimes omission speaks louder than words. For example, Oliver Stone did such a thorough job in his JFK movie recounting Jim Garrison's trial implicating the CIA, the United States Mafia, the Communists, and the anti-Communists. Yet he seems to have deliberately avoided other significant aspects of the assassination. Despite allusions to Clay Shaw, his affiliation with Permindex as the international tie that binds the other organizations together was swept under the rug. The International Lansky Crime Syndicate was also excluded. Likewise, Ruth and Michael Payne were referred to as the Williams and also marginalized. Much like Permindex, Freemasonry appears to be another international tie that binds the wealthy and powerful perpetrators, which has been deliberately omitted from news as well as entertainment outlets. For an impressively enlightening explanation of Permindex's role in the JFK assassination, please read Final Judgment by Michael Collins Piper. For an impressively enlightening explanation of Freemasonry's infiltration by internationalist interests, please read Secret Societies and Subversive Movements by Nesta Webster. It is also very important to point out that Collins' son was obviously the heir to his throne, already co-signing in land deals as early as 1957. It appears rotten apples do not fall far from their trees. According to Alex Sumner, novelist and writer on the occult, the Bridwell Library at Southern Methodist University boasts of a Car P. Collins collection. Sumner indicates that Car P. Collins, Jr. was highly interested in Druidism, Wicca, and magic, with a K, and was allegedly the source of the documents used for the complete Golden Dawn system of magic, a system in which the famous Aleister Crowley participated. The IIC is not proposing that the magic of Freemasonry nor the Satanism of men like Aleister Crowley are real. However, we do propose that by the dawn of the 20th century, such secretive and mystical organizations as the Freemasons and the Golden Dawn were operating to tempt corruptible playboys who were prominent in society. Leaders could be entrapped by a variety of deeds that might be used to blackmail them. There were shady business deals, insider trading, illicit substances, dabbling in witchcraft, and, of course, sexual promiscuity and perversity. And speaking of sexual entrapment, during the 1960s, Jacob Rubinstein was most famous for running the Carousel Club, an establishment catering to a gentleman's voyeuristic desires. It is rumored that half the Dallas police force were alleged to be patrons. Then Rubinstein later became famous in 1963 as the assassin of Lee Harvey Oswald. This also cast light on Rubinstein's ties to the Mafia and raised questions about how he could move so easily as a nefarious citizen among Dallas law enforcement. However, if you were a Dallas policeman in the 1960s and somehow your photo was taken with Tammy True, Sal Ember, Kathy Kay, Baby LeGrand, or Tawny Angel, in a compromising position, or if you simply appreciated the introduction to such ladies, then you might allow a man like Jacob Rubinstein relaxed privileges that most men who traffic in sexual entertainment industries would not normally receive. The IIC finds it noteworthy that not much has changed in 60-plus years. As 2026 arrives, America still lives in the wake of international pimps who represented globalist interests from the other sides of the world and used sexual relations as a means of manipulating ambitious men, many of whom entered their political and business arenas with noble intentions, only to find themselves mired in threats of blackmail, scandal, suffered business opportunities, and even martyrdom if they did not play along. Among the many motives for the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the defense of Freemasonry's covert governance appears to be one of them. Southern Baptist Freemasonry provided a home field advantage, making perfect sense of the Irving New Orleans connection for the framing of Lee Harvey Oswald, as well as a book publishing house in Dallas as the obvious place that the crime scene could be managed. The inscription on the monument in the Masonic section of Oak Grove Cemetery seems a cryptic admission of Irving's secret and evil deeds. It reads, "For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil."